Hello and welcome to our PlusSpec for SketchUp Get Good Fast webcast series. My name is Drew Povey and I'm your host. Now, the reason that we're doing these webcasts is because although recorded tutorials are great, they are somewhat static and impersonal. These webcasts are live and they give you the benefit of asking questions and hopefully to get answers right away. We can also spend a bit more time going into topics at a deeper level. And if you're new to PlusSpec or don't even have it yet, there's no better way to truly take a look. Before we start, we'd like to give special thanks to our platinum sponsor, Brickworks Building Products. Brickworks are one of Australia's largest building product companies with a product range that includes bricks, pavers, stone, masonry blocks, precast concrete panels, and the list goes on. They lead through style and innovation, creating beautiful products that last forever. We'd also like to thank our gold sponsors. Builders Profits provides coaching and training to the building industry no matter where you live in the world. Ginsel is a lightweight stay-in-place formwork system which, when filled with concrete, produces a load-bearing, fire-resistant structural element. And Stramet is a leading Australian manufacturer of roll-formed steel building products. Okay, so in today's webcast, we are going to be discussing multi-level and split-level projects. It is something that comes up from time to time, and we're going to really just try and cover obviously the way that you do it, the different scenarios that you might face, but also just trying to build some confidence so that you understand that or how you're generating those multi-levels or split levels, and even understanding the RLs and making sure that they kind of, you keep on top of them so they're at the exact level that you want them to be. So we will discuss that and heights and how you can relate that to the site and all those kinds of things. So we're just going to dive in. I'm going to open a model here and I'm going to quickly explain multi-level. It's pretty easy. Here is an example of a multi-level project. In this example, you can see that it's a apartment, multi-family, or it's an apartment style project, and the levels are obviously first floor, second floor, third floor roof with an outdoor entertaining space up there, etc. So it's just this build-up of levels that are stacked on top of each other. That's multi-level, and that can be towers, or a 40-floor tower block, or it could even just be a multi-family home, so with 2 or 3 levels to the home, or even apartments like this. I'm going to quickly open up a split level and explain split level. Split level is a few different things, but typically it's when you have a portion of the home that is sitting at a different level to the rest of the home. This is a model from Scott J, a PlusSpec user, and I'm using this really nice model to showcase what he's done here. I'm just going to hide the ground, and you can see that, again, to explain it, you have some of the home that's sitting at a different level, and then it can step up, and it can have obviously different foundation and different things that might be going on in there, but the rest of the house sits on a higher level. So it's a low level and a high level. It's the easiest way to explain it. However, split levels can also include mezzanines and parts of the home where you've just got essentially parts of the floor that are sitting at different heights to other parts of the floor. Simple as that. I do have an example of one that's combining split levels as well as multi-level. So this is a 2-story home. So you've got your ground floor and your first floor, or your first floor and your second floor, depending on your terminology that you use. And in it, though, you'll see that it does step down, and it's got a bunch of stuff going on there. But again, you've got some split level information going on here too. You've got some of the portion of the home sitting at this level or this height, and then other parts of the home, if I quickly just jump in here, coming up the stairs and having that split level going on where it's at different heights. So you've got an actual floor level here, and you've got a floor level here. We're going to quickly go through and discuss how you model it and the different kind of scenarios, as we said earlier. But again, we're also going to show you how you can make sure that you keep track of the heights. At the moment, it isn't automated. So when you put in a floor, it doesn't have a RL or a finished floor level or anything associated to it. It is a manual requirement that you keep track of that. And that's because there are a lot of complexities, particularly in split levels. And the advantage of PlusSpec compared to any other software like Revit and ArchiCAD, etc., is that those software are really not 3D, even though they say they are. And yes, you are building a 3D model, but it's based around the 2D. And that's why it becomes very important, because you're doing all of your modeling in 2D format. You actually do have to put an RL or like a level or a height for everything that you draw, because otherwise you can't model in 3D. It won't generate it. So it's a requirement. And there are some benefits to it, but it's also very restrictive. Whereas PlusSpec doesn't have that. We are inside of SketchUp, and you have to think of SketchUp as just a open-ended space of true 3D. And when you're drawing or modeling or designing with PlusSpec for SketchUp, you're not constrained by anything. You can lift and move and manipulate anything however you want. So it is important to understand why, all the difference, and the fact that we don't necessitate you to put in a height. It's because that you're totally, it's flexible for you. You can do whatever you want anyway. So I am going to jump in and showcase, we'll get started. So let me just pause that. I'm actually going to just quickly shut down some of these things so I can free up some of my computer space. Okay. All right. Again, just make sure that if you do have any questions or anything as we're going through, just make sure that you ask them. RL means real level. So that has a question that's come through already. There's a lot of different terminology. It's fairly common around the world. So real level. So what is the real level? Typically, it's based off a datum point. So when you're working with a site, such as what you're seeing on screen, when you're creating your contours or your site map, often that will have a datum level where the site surveyor's gone out and actually calculated the elevational heights, etc. And it's typically what you report and include in your 2D documentation to tell the exact real level height of items based off the datum. However, some people, when they're doing the 2D drawings, etc., they will use finished floor levels or structural floor levels and so forth. So it's just a few different ways that you can go through and essentially record height information. And sometimes you use RL and finished floor level. Okay, so just keep on asking your questions, but I'm going to quickly carry through here. So when we demonstrate projects, this is just actually a single story. There's only got one floor. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can now go through and start to manipulate this and add more information. Again, with PlusSpec, really important that you understand what scene or view you are on, and also really important that you control your layers, because that's what's going to enable you to model really quickly and smartly. Like, so for example, when you start getting into the modeling kind of aspect, you don't really want the entourage there. You don't want people, you don't want trees. You just want to simplify the site. And most likely you don't want your sun on either. So you can go view, turn off your shadows, etc. It just means that it's going to run a lot smoother and faster. And again, you don't have that other kind of geometry that's getting in the way. Now, I'm actually just going to right click and update my presentation scene just because I want to work on this right now. But when I was working out the levels here, they were based on the contour. And this CAD survey, it wasn't actually a CAD survey, I just created it. It didn't have a datum level, but I've been able to determine the heights of all the contours. And then when I've started modeling this particular project, it was based on where I wanted it to be on the contour. But again, I can grab everything in my project at any time, and using the move key, I can move it up and down. So the heights and the location of your model and how it actually, or your project, and how it relates to the site is really flexible, and you can lift it however you want. It's purely just a move tool. And that's what's giving you the ability to position it. Now, for example, if you had a datum and you knew that you would include the datum somewhere in your model, and typically it's shown, if it was a site surveyor's drawings, it would, it's typically shown with some kind of symbol. For example, I'll just make that like that, and I'm going to move it. And your datum in the CAD drawings, when you brought it in from, the CAD drawings, etc., it would already be at the height. So it would be some height in there, and then your you would know what the height of that is, of the datum, and that enables you to kind of calculate the height of where your slab is. Now, I've just done a plinth system in this, so pretty simple, plinth going around and the walls have been generated from there. Now, with PlusSpec, when you're generating your project, it's important to know that it is, unlike any other software, it's very focused around structure. Structure is giving you the ability to understand buildability, your detailing, and it enables you to design way smarter and better, right? And that's our opinion. And it's also important to note that levels are really just coming from your wall. So often people will say, but I want my slab to be at this height, and I want my second story to be at this height, and blah, 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 blah. And how do I set that up before I start? Normally what I'll be saying to people is, well, that's really dependent on the kind of construction techniques that you're going to be using. And obviously it can change over time. PlusSpec is really flexible for you. It makes it really flexible and easy for you to change different materialities, wall types, and those kinds of things. So you can adjust it as you go, and it's important to kind of keep that mentality. I normally I suggest that you be very fluid, especially in a design program or when you're in that phase, and don't get too caught up with it, because walls are going to generate your next height. So if I know what I want my wall height to be for the ceiling level or whatever, or just the overall height of my wall, that's the basis for my next structure or my next floor. So I'm going to quickly delete this roof here. It was a flat roof system, and I know that when I generated my walls, I generated them at 3 meters. Now I'm using metric, but if you are using imperial, then you'll be using feet and inches. Again, as always, I'm just demonstrating in metric. It's what I know best, and I can show it to you faster. So just ignore units of measurement, really doesn't change anything. But once you have the height of your initial floor kind of established, and again, that's flexible, you can change it as you go, that's how you're going to determine the next level. Now, we definitely promote your using the walls because it gives you the ability to kind of manipulate as you go. So if I wanted to add an additional level on here, I mean, if I wanted to copy the walls underneath, I could. So I could simply go, you know what, I want to take all of these walls and I'm just going to use the move and then click the option to copy them, and then, or control if you're on the PC, and then you can move it up and down the blue axis. This is giving you the ability to determine where you want to place things. Now, again, I could delete that. I didn't actually select all my walls, but if I hold down my shift key and select the different walls that I want to put in there, I can then be doing it accurately and position them again on the blue axis. So the blue axis is what you're using to determine your heights. Now, I think most of you here would know that. It's pretty basic. But what a lot of software doesn't enable you to do is really understand structure. And again, how am I going to connect this? So often a lot of people will just try and they'll draw all their walls, and then they realize, well, actually, no, how does my floor sit on this? Is it going to be sitting on top of the walls and come from the walls? Or what am I actually going to do? And it's a very, more often than not, it's a forgotten element. So using the walls to generate faces and to put your next structure is really important. But again, you could also, even if you just knew what you wanted to do right away, you could be using the SketchUp tools just to generate and draw the faces that you want. I might know that I want my building to go here, for example. Once I've generated this, it gives me the ability to go into either the slab tool or the joist tool, depending on what I'm wanting to do. And then I can, for example, include floor. I can decide if I want it to be a below face, above face, and I can go through and I can choose my different lumber or timber, etc. So when you press submit, you just need to tell it which way you want it to span. So for example, I'll span it this way, and it's going to now generate my flooring. This is awesome because it's starting to teach me what I need to do. So I've decided here that what will end up happening is that this is sitting on top of my joist, my wall below. And if I go into structure, you'll be able to see that sitting on top of the top plate. So I've got my joist doing everything that it needs to do. If I go back into that scene that I was in before, most likely what will happen is my cladding will just continue up, and I'll show you how you can do that shortly. So one of the tools that a lot of people don't understand they can do is they can actually right click on a wall and create similar wall. And what it does is it brings up all of the parameters that you might have set in there before. So I've got everything here. I don't need to do anything else, so I can just press submit. And now that I've generated my flooring, it makes it really easy for me just to go around and trace. But it's very important to note the alignment of your walls. Again, a lot of you I've seen are quite intermediate here, so I won't spend too long on this. But if you click on the right arrow key, it gives you the ability to toggle through the wall alignment. It's just important that I want in this construction detail that I want it to be my finished material on the outside. So now what I can do is I can just quickly go around and trace this basic shape. I'm keeping it very simple here. I can go around and I can enclose it. And now I've got this second level. Now, again, there are so many different ways that you can detail this, and this is where it becomes truly exciting because this is true detailing. You could have so many different construction types that you want here, but I might just decide that I want this wall and this wall, and the cladding needs to go down. So I can edit these walls, and I just need to know the distance of my joist because the joist is structured and it's going to tell me what that distance is. I can go down the manual override, and then I can actually do a step down. So I can say, for example, that I want it to be that, press submit. And now you can see that it's reading as 1. You can see that the cladding, you might need to tidy it up if the material is not aligning correctly, like 100%. You can actually clean that up, etc. So you can go through and really start to mass out your floors. And again, I could now just simply grab everything that I want here. If I've got an additional level, and I can simply continue to grab the elements or the objects that I want and place them so I can go up to a 3rd story. And then obviously if I really wanted to, I could be sculpting my walls, pushing, pulling them and doing whatever I wanted. Most of you should know this, but the next part, and this is where a lot of people are like, well, I need to know what my levels are and how can I control those? The simplest and easiest way is actually through the guide or the grid tool. And so say, for example, you go off and you understand where you want to set your finished floor level, your structural floor level. Then you can set a tape measure tool, and the tape measure tool enables you to set these little guides or grids, and you can do them on the vertical. So for example, what I can do now that I've set my first one, I can now grab it again. So I'm just going to left click on the actual guide, and then I can bring it up on the blue axis, hold down shift, and then I can decide where I want it to be. Do I want it to be, for example, to this sheeting? And I've now got my second level. So if I go on an elevation, you can now see that I've got my ground level, and then I've got my finished floor level on the 2nd story. I could even go further to this. This might be structural level, or maybe I even want to capture different parts. So if I really wanted to, I could start again just copying the grid and even go to the underside of my walls for my ceiling level. For example, if my ceiling level was going to be at the top of that wall. So really, really simple tool, right? And then with this tool, you can even come off and put in a dimension. So you can come across and say, well, okay, I want to dimension this. So I'm just going to make sure that I follow it. And then I'm able to go across, again, grabbing any point that I want and just making sure that I'm putting it like so. And that's giving me the ability, as I'm modeling now, to make sure that I'm going to be aware of my heights. Because if I change my grid and I decide, well, you know what? I don't want a 3 meter to the underside of those walls. I'm going to make my ceiling level a bit different. Then I can simply grab everything that's on this level here, including the actual guide, and I can say, well, you know what? It actually wants to be raised. So I'm going to use the move tool and I can move it up. And as I'm moving it up, you can see that the dimensions are going with it. So I might decide I want it to be a really, really large ceiling or a high ceiling on this ground level or 1st floor level, depending on what you want to call it. And that means I can now simply grab all of my walls and I can say, right, I need to change them. So, you know, if you do it one by one, you can go into the redefine, simply grab it and get on the blue axes, and I can even just grab it to that underside. So it makes it really quick for you to continue to sculpt and change the heights and sizes and the look and feel of your home. And I hope that what you're seeing here, though, is that the fact that we don't require you to put in a height is actually really, there's a lot of freedom in that, because the whole point of PlusSpec is it's design oriented. Even if you're a builder or a contractor, and if you're just trying to trace your plan to get your estimate, the idea is that you're not getting stuck or caught up in attributes and thousands of attributes. So by just simply being able to move on the blue axes, you can determine where your things belong. And then the grids are giving you the abilities to make sure that everything actually is aligned. Now, by the way, some people will say, but how do I know that they're getting stuck to that? It's due diligence, and you are having to make sure that, they do align and work correctly. You can actually select your grids, and then you can move them across too. So if you want to, for example, make sure that they're going to be, move them across and have them in the middle of the model, so that when you go into your structure, for example, you can see how my grid's working. Is everything actually aligned and working how it should? These grid lines here will also be the basis for my elevations. So in my 2D drawings, if I now wanted to call out my finished floor levels, or the levels that I want to capture on my 2D drawings, I've already got these grids here. So again, if I was to go into, for example, elevation 1, and I'm just going to quickly turn off that, and I'm going to quickly turn on my guides. It's because I'm in the wrong one. So let's go into, for example, elevation 2. Okay, there we go. You can see here in this one, I've got the basis of my guides. If I go out far enough, you'll see that I've even got my dimensioning here. So if you really wanted to, you can even play around and you can move your dimensioning, or I can redimension if I wanted. Now, I don't typically use these dimensions in my 2D documentation sets, whether it be schematic or construction. I would, that's why I put it off to the side. I just like having the information there. It's inside the model, so I can make sure that I can quickly see what I'm doing in the model, but then in the 2D drawings, I'll actually just redimension that so I can control the look and feel of the dimensions a lot better and have it suit the scale that I'm working at on the page. But the fact that you've got the grids there set to the levels, you can understand very quickly whether or not it's working and if it's at the correct level. And it becomes very obvious, that you can see that. So again, that's what I do. If you're in the all scenes, etc., you can still keep those on. Don't forget, you can hide your grids at any time. So in your presentation, you can just go into view, turn off guides, and then you can update the different scenes so they understand that. I do, if I'm dimensioning, I'll often also make sure I put those on an actual individual layer, because I prefer those to be controllable as well. So I would actually create, or see if there's something in here that I've already got as an individual layer. It might be line work. I normally put in a 0, 0 line work layer. It enables me to kind of add additional lines if I need to for my 2D drawing sets. I won't explain that further just because this is not a 2D drawing webcast, but I might say, okay, I've grabbed those dimensions and I'm actually going to go now into the entity info and I'll put them on the 0, 0 line work. So again, if I wanted to turn off line work, I can now hide them. I can hide my entourage, etc. And if I really want to, I can turn my guides back on. Now, from time to time, we do get some people reaching out and saying, great, that actually works, fantastic, but how do I lock it? How do I set it? The simple fact is, at the moment, you can't. And I just hope that you're seeing that there's so much flexibility in that. I remember when I was working and using different systems like Revit and ArchiCAD, it used to do my head in when you're trying to make changes and actually try and do it in a free-form manner and not be constrained and having to think about and lock things to heights, and that's one of the flexibilities of PlusSpec. It enables you to be really agile and flexible and fluid with what you're trying to achieve. And more importantly, because you're looking at structure and you're determining your heights based on structure, you can't go wrong. Now, there are a few different strategies that you can do to even capture your RLs or different kind of readouts, etc. So if you really wanted to, you can create little symbols of your own, and I'll give you an example of that. We've got a bunch that I've created in the past, but say, for example, I'm just going to do something super simple. You might have this, just because I'm pedantic, I'm going to make it good. Okay, so I've got the first one, make group, could even copy it, and I'm going to rotate it just so it's on all sides. I'm going to do it by 90. Just give you an example of what's going on here. Go like so. I'm going to turn that into a group, and now I can move it up. I've got my point, and I can locate it directly on something in my project. And now here, I can do two things. I can actually use if I double click into that group, I can use the text tool or the 3D text. I normally would probably use the 3D text. It's up to you. And you can then type in, for example, the height, and you can do that on the plan view or even on the elevation view. It really depends on what you're trying to do. I don't typically do that. I just think it can be a little bit of overkill. The best part about PlusSpec is you've got all of the information, and you can use the tape measure tool to make sure that you're looking at all the heights and etc. on the blue axis with the tape measure. So typically I won't need it. If I need to call out a height, I'll jump into the model and then I'll just use the tape measure to check it out. Right. Let's just go back into here. Just had a bit of a pause there. But so in here you can say, okay, well, I want this to be, say it's, the RL is like 14.85 place. I'm having a bit of a lag there, so there we go. Cool. I'll just go to shut that one down. And then you can place it in your model. Again, you can put it on, for example, the horizontal or vertical, depending on what you're trying to do. So I might just put it there. Once I've got it, I'll move it across, for example, and I could have changed the font and I could have lifted this up, etc. This is all in that group, and that means now I can even visually ensure that everyone that's viewing this is understanding the height. Now, if you understand components and groups, well, components specifically, you can also do the face me. So if I actually make it a component, I can also do the always face camera. I'm just going to say elevation tag, create. Now, you need to set the axes, but it means that when you were to rotate this, it will always be like that. And if I went back into this, I can actually fix it. But I'm not going to talk about the face me. So we'll do that. I mean, there's a lot of, if you want to look at the face me, so you can set objects so they always rotate to face, there's a lot of resources online to show you how to do it. It's actually really easy. For example, I've got these really low poly trees in here, and you can see that they are actually only 2D, but no matter how I turn my model, they're always facing me. That's the example of it. The reason you do that is it's kept a really low poly. You're not always trying to create a 3D object. And if you've got really complicated objects such as trees, all they're going to do is slow down your model. Whereas if you do these simplified objects that face me, they appear 3D. No matter how you're rotating around, you can read it perfectly, but the object themselves are very small in size. Okay. Just going to quickly jump into the questions, and we'll start doing a little bit of a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please start writing them now. Also had a little bit of a bug splat, but that's because I've got a lot of stuff open on my computer still, so just ignore that. I'm going to quickly load this one back up, and we're going to go into the initial Q&A. That's the majority of really what I wanted to show, so we're going to try and keep it pretty short and on point today. Again, realistically, just being that you aren't constrained by how you want to create your different floor and your different floor levels and your different heights. That to you is like super flexible. But if you want to just ensure that you're capturing it, use the guide or the grid tool to do so. Okay. We'll also show this one here. I'm just going to quickly talk about this one as well here. So again, whilst we're in this one, if we were to go into the structure here, you can see that you're capturing so much here. But it's very easy for you to determine the different heights. And you can see if you've got different parts of your slab or whatever that are at a different height, then you're just modeling each part independently, and then you can change the footing detail or the information to suit what you want. You can also do step downs within the slab, etc. But if I really wanted to right now, I could grab that piece and I could say, well, you know what, it's actually wrong and I've got to lower it down. So there's a bigger step down now, for example. But I'm not constrained by having to go into that tool and say, I want to set that at this height, and then go into all my other tools and say, I want to change these to suit that height. It's a very flexible format. And me personally, I love it, especially if you're designing. And then obviously you can add your staircases, etc. And it just gives you the ability to really start to understand how things are going to look and feel. And importantly for the builder, understand how they're actually going to put things together. Okay, Q&A. How can you hide the axes line? So the axes when you're screen printing. You can actually do that. If you're going to be screen printing, I'm assuming that you're doing that for example, just taking quick shots so you can share them with your structural engineer, etc. Typically, they won't really care. And so like you just grab a screen grab and then you would screen grab it. However, SketchUp actually has an inbuilt feature and it will automatically get rid of the axes. And that means, for example, say I was speaking to a structural engineer and I was wanting to get some information over here. I can kind of zoom in and get it to a point that I'm happy with. And then I can actually go File and I can go Export. I can select 2D graphic. That gives me the ability now to call it what I want. But if I go into my options, you can see that these are the ones that I will always use. So width of 4800, and it will automatically update the height. Always put better quality, anti-alias, press OK. And I'll save that to my desktop. We'll see how it saves. Press Export. It's going to create the 2D graphic, and you can save it as a JPEG or PNG, whatever you want. And you're not going to have any of the axes coming out in the final output. So I'll just quickly open that so you can see it. Just loading the JPEG. Okay, so I'll share my screen again. So I've now actually opened the JPEG. You can see I'm moving it around, and it's actually gotten rid of the axes information. I prefer using the native or this feature rather than using a screen grab tool to take it, just because I think you can really control the quality, so the line work, etc. And then you can trim it, cut it, and do it whatever else you want to do in any kind of screen grab software or editing software as well. And then you don't even have to worry about the axes. However, if inside of PlusSpec for SketchUp, if you go into your preferences, you can actually control your axes as well. So I believe that's preferences, and then you can go into, for example, your axes and directions and colors, and you can opt to display them or not to, and you can even change the colors and all that kind of stuff. If it's not in preferences, it will be probably in another part, but you'll be able to find the documentation on that. Again, I don't typically hide it. I think having the axes information there is very useful. And if you're going into layout for your 2D construction drawings, they won't come through. Okay, so that actually isn't a stupid question. It's a very good question. It's a very recommended workflow, and it's something that I love doing, and that is controlling, for example, your first floor and your second floor and your third floor and your fourth floor separately, so you can continue to model in the first. Very easy process to do it. I'm going to quickly show you how. So if I just quickly shut that one down, I'm going to open this one here. Let's see if this saved everything. I don't think it did. Okay, it didn't. That's okay. Shut this down. So I'm going to quickly, again, just get rid of that. And again, I'm just going to quickly go in here. I'm just going to go walls, generate or create similar wall. And I'm going to quickly just mass this out. I'm going to show you the principle of it. So submit, again, trace what you want. I often will be going to structure mode because structure mode gets rid of all of the unnecessary things, and it just makes it a lot easier. It means that you can be really confident that what you're drawing is going to work. Don't forget, you've got your finish versus your structure. Structure is really important to consider. Now, you can obviously come off on angles, etc. too. But simplifying your views in what you're working on PlusSpec is what's going to make you a really confident and smart, quick user. So don't hesitate swapping through the different views. They really make it a lot better. Now, I'm going to quickly turn off my entourage. I'm going to update that. Now, what you're going to do is you actually want to, I mean, you could do this from the start, but you can do it retrospectively. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly just grab those new walls that I've created. And you can do that by left clicking at the top right, hovering, bring it down to the top left, bottom left, let go, and it will just pick up all of the items in that box. Alternatively, you can left click on a wall, hold down shift, and just keep on left clicking to select the additional things that you want in that group. Then once you've selected everything, you're going to right click and you say make it a group. Then what you need to do is actually create your own manual layer. So you have to click on layers. If you don't see the entity info layers and scenes, you do that by clicking on your window. And on your window tool, you'll want to tick those. The most important thing that you have open at all times is entity info and layers. However, I do put on scene styles and even shadow settings. Once you're in your layers, you can click on the plus sign. And that's when I do, for example, like 0, 1, or you can work it however you want, 0, 0 maybe, 0, 0, second floor. You can use any naming convention that you want. But now that I've got this 0, 0, second floor, I can left click on this new group that I've created, click on the entity info, and now I can assign it to my second floor. This means if I want to be on my first floor or ground floor, you can at any time simply untick your second floor, and then second floor will completely disappear. When I'm working in multiple levels, I 100% recommend doing this. I often will do it retrospectively, so people will ask me, well, when you start drawing your first floor or your ground floor, do you turn that into a group straight away and call it ground floor? And the answer to that is no, because again, from a design aspect, I probably haven't made those decisions, and I'll be making those decisions as I go. It really depends. Retrospectively is pretty quick and easy to do, right? So the second thing would be to turn off your site, etc. So turn off site and other items that you probably don't want on there. I'm just going to quickly say that that's fine. And then what I would be doing is saying, okay, well, this is actually all in my ground floor. I'll actually just hide those just by deactivating them. So I've selected everything that I want on my ground floor, including probably my deck. Got my deck, everything else selected. Again, now that I've got it all selected, I can right click and I can make it a group. And again, I'm now going to click on the plus sign. I'm going to say 00 underscore first floor. And then now I can assign this to the first floor. And you can do this and divide your model however you want. And again, now I've got my first floor, so I can simply untick it and get rid of everything in there. Now, if you forget things when you first turned it into a group, like I didn't grab these pieces of trim, all you need to do is left click to select them. You can go edit cut or use the shortcut. Then you want to turn on the group that you want to put it in and just double click. When you double click back into that group, you're now being able to add additional things and continue to modify that group. And so I can go edit, paste in place. And now that's going to be attributed to that group, which again means if I wanted to turn off my first floor and I untick the visibility, it's now disappeared. But if I wanted to turn my 00 second floor on, I can untick it. It's now going to be activated, and I can continue to work over that. Alternatively, tick that one back on, and I can continue to manipulate it. So again, for height, if I was to determine, I normally trace the walls. I think it's the easiest, it's the most logical way to think about adding additional level. Once I've traced my walls, that's when I'm understanding height, etc. Again, I can manipulate this second floor now by double clicking into the group. That's the only thing you're going to have to understand with this workflow. And now I can select walls and I can simply push and pull them. I can make it bigger. I can add windows. I can do whatever I want. But this is where I would normally start thinking about what I actually want to do as far as height. And again, for me, that's very much based around the structure that you want to use. You can raise it on the blue axis wherever you want it. And I could, for example, double click in walls and I can generate a face of walls. And now I can click on the face and I can decide what structure I want to use. Like for example, last time I showed you how to do the joists, but realistically I could look at this and say, well, actually I want to go to the outside of my frame, so I'm just going to use the SketchUp rectangle tool. I could have drawn it on the underside, but super simple for me to do whatever I want. And this time I'll go in and create, for example, a concrete slab. So I'll go in there, I only want it to be thickness only. I can go change it, the level, etc., press submit. I've now got my slab, and again, everything is controlled by the blue axes and the moving. So I can move them, I can put it into place at the bottom of my wall, and then now I can grab it all. And if I know the thickness now, I know that that needs to sit on top of my structure. Again, I really like and recommend you going into the structure scene, making sure it's working how you want, and there you have it. And now I know what the height of my slab will be, and that can be determined through the guide tool, etc., like I showed you previously. And if you've done what I had on the side, putting in my guides, you would grab your guides, realign it to the slab, and now you've got your height. It will be written and the dimensions will automatically adjust. But you are using the structure to determine heights. And, you know, I can't emphasize the strength in that enough, because I think often people just go straight to a height without understanding structure and the way that you want it to work. So in this particular case, I could have even extended my slab out. So maybe I wanted to have an exposed slab there, and I could even just edit that now and say, well, yeah, I wanted my slab to be on the complete outside edge. And so when we're looking at this, we've got the exposed concrete slab there for an aesthetic reason, or to bring in some kind of horizontality or whatever. So you're really detailing and making those decisions as you go. Super intelligent, and again, based around structure, you cannot go wrong. I hope that explains it. It does mean, though, that if you start putting in additional items, such as, for example, furniture and all that kind of stuff, just make sure you double click into the group before you place it, because if you don't, it's not going to be attributed to that layer, to that level. So again, if I put in this bed here, it doesn't know that it's in the second floor. So if I went now and turned off my second floor, it's still activated, and so is the slab. So what I want to do is grab the slab, grab the additional item, edit, cut. Simple process. It's so fast as well, especially if you use the shortcuts. Double click in, edit, paste in place. And you won't have to do that as long as you double click into your group before you start actually putting stuff in. So again, double click in. Now I could go in and say, cool, I want to attribute structure or whatever I want to do, and that will automatically become part of the second floor group. And that's just on repeat, but massive control, because again, if I really needed to turn my second floor off, I'm now back into my ground floor and I can continue to model in 3D. Okay, so do you simply copy the first floor level tab and just move the cut plane so it will show properly? Well, the cut plane will automatically go through every level inside of PlusSpec for SketchUp. So if I were to, I'm just going to create a new section, place it, and I'm going to put it here. As you can see, when I move that through, I'll grab this, make sure I'm grabbing the right one. When I move this one through, my levels are automatically assigned. It's always going to cut through just what I need to show, right? I'm not ever having to manipulate the section. So if I was to move the level of my slab now and move it up and down so the height's changed, that will automatically be reflected through the section. If you're talking about the grid though, so if I was like, again, I have to do it from scratch, but if I was to place a grid, I just go back into all and say, okay, I want to set on my blue, and that's the top of that floor. And then I want to grab it and I'm going to put it on top of my, for example, making sure that you're on the blue. That's the only thing you need to really ensure. And then that's the top of that slab. So now again, I could do what I showed you before. I could dimension and just dimension the top of that and make sure that it's right. By the way, make sure that you grab the actual relevant guides that you're wanting. So you can see that that one was moved not directly above. So when you're copying it and you're moving it, just make sure that you are on the correct line. So it stays directly above, and then that way you can dimension correctly. And your grids will be aligned in the same area or same space. They're stacked above each other. And that's how you're going to be able to dimension correctly, right? So I now know what my dimension is. Now, the question is, if I move that, what I do, like I showed you before, is I actually left click on the guide, which is for that level, and then I select my new level, and I might know that I actually need to raise it by 3 feet. Type in 3 feet, I've raised it, and you can see that my guide has gone with it, and my dimensions have automatically been updated. If I did have a 3D symbol, like I showed you before, you just need to then double click in, delete the text that you put in for the height, and just put in the new height, which you can calculate super easily. It's just not automated. So I hope that answers that question. If you need me to explain anything further on that, just let me know. But you can do it retrospectively too. So if I forgot to move the grid with it, and I went, well, again, it needs to be raised because I'm going to raise all of my wall heights over here. And then go, oh, damn, I didn't actually, and it's easy now. I can see that it's not aligning properly. Again, I can now just grab the guide, and I'm just using the move. I can snap it to the blue axis, and I can just reference the point that I want for it to snap to, right? And again, if you're not liking where you've put the grids and you want to overlay it so it's kind of cutting through or going through your model, then again, just get on one of the axes and move it across into your model. So now you can see that it's working properly. Very easy to do. It's all around the move key. So don't think of things being stuck in a static place or in a static environment. You move it however you want, and everything else will be updated to suit, so you can pull the information out of it. Now, if you really wanted to, there's one final aspect here. If you go into, for example, your different groups, you'll notice that there's like an instance, and if you keep on double clicking into the different groups, so into the slab group, etc., each one will have like an instance and other bits, and there'll be some that actually have empty fields. And if you wanted to include the height or other information here, so you can pull it out easily inside of your 2D drawings, rather than having to try and kind of do it manually, you could, for example, put now that that's in there, when you go into layout, you can always use the smart annotation tag and pull out the finished floor level. Again, it is a manual calc though, so if I was to move this, then I would have to go back in and update my calc that I put in there. So I'd have to update that measurement. Okay, I hope that answers that. I've got a couple of other questions that aren't really related to the topic. So if you do have any topic related questions, please write them now. And we've got another probably 5 minutes that we can go through things. If not, I will jump on to a couple of other questions that were asked from the beginning. So how long before automated pricing will be available? You'll have to expound on that. We actually don't really believe in automatic or putting in subsets of pricing. Generic pricing. We think the only way that it can be really done well is if products have or manufacturers and suppliers or vendors have their products inside of PlusSpec and they actually put in their pricing. If you're a builder or an estimator, you shouldn't really be using generic estimating or pricing, in our opinion. We've got some blog posts and a few articles on that because we think it just causes error. And if you're going to try and do quick quotes based on, for example, what Rawlinson's or other books are saying, I mean, that's where you're going to be out. Using PlusSpec, you can put in real pricing. So we are very focused on that. And obviously builders and contractors get different pricing rates, etc., depending on your business and where you're located and who you're dealing with. So as far as automated pricing, we are working on having real manufacturers' products with pricing as we speak. but everything else you'll need to do your due diligence and put in the pricing of the products that you're using. Similar to square meters or square feet, at RubySketch, we are not a fan of square feet or square meter calculations. We think it costs the industry nothing but headaches, error, and causes a lot of waste and costs you business. So we although you can put and calculate by square meter or square feet, we still don't recommend it. Okay, I do have another question. It's about the 2D, the documentation side. We will be doing a follow-up or the next part of our 2D documentation shortly, and so we can cover that in there, and we will cover it in there. But basically, when you're in the 2D drawings, you can pull out the different symbols. So in the 2D set, you'll have, for example, if you use our scrapbook, so if I was to zoom out here, and if I was to add file, new, and select, for example, one of the PlusSpec templates, and we've got metric and imperial paper sizes. We've also got a scrapbook, and you can go into your scrapbooks, and we've got a lot of symbols. So, for example, click on the scrapbook, you can go into the PlusSpec ones, you can go into your plans. And so your question about, well, how do I capture the finish floor level there? When you chuck one of these in there, you've got, for example, the floor finish plus the FFL or whatever you want to call it. All you need to do is just double click in there, and then you can type in the amount, for example, whatever it is. So it is a little bit manual, but it is going back into that mentality of due diligence and making sure that, see, the problem with a lot of automated things is that you can rely on them and then you stop checking, and then every system requires that you put the process in place and everything's working appropriately. So sometimes I do emphasize that a couple of manual things can be good as long as the majority is automated. And for finish floor levels and stuff like that and levels, I don't mind that it's manual. And then there's a lot of different other symbols that you can use, set out boundaries, blah, 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 whatever you need to put in there. So you're just capturing it in the 2D side of things. However, if you really wanted to, again, you could use those little symbols like I showed you, or again, you could even double click in and just put in 3D text. 3D text is really powerful because you can place it in there, and it means that when people are looking at your 3D model, all of the information's there. And because you're doing 3D text, technically you could even just use it in your 2D documentation, because when you put the 2D text or 3D text in there, I should say, you can put it on the horizontal plane, and you might have, the finish floor level, the what kind of floor material you want. It's all in there, and it's held in the model. But personally, I think it's a good idea to put a lot of 3D text around your model, so people looking at the model can really understand what you're wanting to do. So I might say, for example, concrete, and I might even say the name of I might say bedroom. I can change the text, etc., and fonts, and I can place it, and I might just put it on here, and then now I can rotate it, make it sit in the model however I want. So again, moving it around, and now as you can see, if I place it around, I would put it on a layer. Don't put it on layer 0. So if I was going to use a lot of text in my model, I would typically create a new custom layer, and I'd call it text or whatever. But it does, what I like about it is the information's there. It's in the model, and you can control it. You're putting in whatever you want to any style that you want. If you really wanted to, you can even paint that with the paint tool. So you can turn it from white to black or whatever. And then again, if you do it well enough, you can even use it in your 2D drawings, and it means you don't have to type in any additional text. You've got all the information that you need there, and you can just put that all around your model. That should answer that question. Well, can you make, this is the final question, can you make a group a component, then add a Z attribute for the RL? If you really want to, I've heard of people doing it. I actually don't see a massive advantage to it personally, but I've only played around with it a little bit. The information or the attributes that you're still getting from a component are still limited as far as what you can pull out in your 2D drawing. So although the information is there in the component, when you click on the component and see where it is, it's really not going to have a carry-on effect where it's going to help your 2D documentation or make it really easier for you to figure out. Because I find the tape tool is like, it's what you do on site if you're a contractor or a builder anyway, right? If I want to know an actual height, I'm grabbing the tape measure tool, grabbing a point, moving it across and saying, okay, there's my height. I know what it is. It's super, super quick. If you were going to do what you're saying, and that's a little bit of an advanced technique in SketchUp. So for those of you who haven't really created a lot of components in SketchUp, it's not something that's often done a lot. The only advantage of that is you'll be able to kind of double click in, go into your component and try and figure out, and have those attributes there. But for me, it's just as quick and it's manual as well. I just lean on the tape measure tool. But you can do it, try it. If it works for you, great. And if you start doing some interesting things with it, reach out, let us know. But thank you for everyone who came along. Hopefully we've given an overview. That's all that this was about. We haven't gone into different techniques of different construction types and how you can do all the different scenarios, but you can do anything that you want with PlusSpec, depending on the construction type. There is no better way to detail and understand what your structure and your finished materials are doing. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We do hope that you've been attending and watching our podcasts as well. If you haven't, they're on iTunes, it's on Stitcher. You can go directly to our website and you can even listen from the website directly, and it talks about the different issues that architects and designers are facing versus the builder or contractor. And it's called Architects Are From Mars, Builders Are From Venus. We hope you listen and we hope you spread the word. If not, we'll see you next week. Thanks.